एकम् अक्षरम् हृदि निरन्तरम् लिख्यते हृदय कुहरमध्ये केवलं मात्रम् अहम् साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदिविष मनसा चिन्तता मज्जता आत्मनिष्ठो देहं ब्रह्मय जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्ति नाहं तत्तद्भावशुद्धिसमये सद्भाव दृष्टा मनुष्टा Namo Ramana. With Bhagwan's immense grace, we have been meditating on the verses of Anma bodham. The original work is by Adi Shankara, and we have been relying on the Tamil translation of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, who of course begins by saying, "A Shankaranum Anmavu Kanniyam Avano Anmavai Ennagatte Irundu Indru Tamil Solvanum Annavan Andri Matrar." He begins by saying that it is the one Atma Shakti which wrote this work in Sanskrit then, and it is the same Atma Shakti that is now remaining within me, translating this into Tamil is the Mangalam verse by Bhagavan. We have been summarizing the 68 verses, having gone through them at some length, and we find ourselves in the second segment, the 1 to 5 verses being the introductory verses. 6 to 15, we were saying that they are about the world. That though in the introductory verses, the Jnanam is supposed to dawn like that, our experience is that we still see the solid world in front of us, and the Guru starts by explaining how the Atma itself is appearing to be this world, and we had seen that he first tries to deal with it from the perspective of Ishvara. That if someone can identify with that Ishvara Bhava, then they can easily, or they are somewhere near that kind of awareness, they can easily understand and come to the Atma Swarupa. So the verses 8 and 9 were about how the Mudarkaranamai Murudin Adarama Adaram Aduam Paresha Nahate Udadi Udikumurigal Pol Ulagangal. Inside the Aham of the Ishvara, all these are present. And then if one cannot understand that the Ishvara's Aham is what permeates everything, therefore treat it like the gold and all the world name and form as the ornaments. And now from the name and form, go back to the self. That was 9. So in 10th verse, Vindile Pola, Vilangisan Itrondrum, Vilangisanil Tondrum. In Isa itself, Tondrum, Enil Upadi is in the Vibu. Annalum up Veda Upadigalal Binnan Pol Vanavai Podalum Pundrapur. So one more verse, that in Ishvara only all these are appearing because of the inner consciousness having associated with Enil Upadi, various kinds of adjuncts, various kinds of supports, various kinds of instruments of perception. Therefore, suddenly the one light, as though through a spectrum appearing as many, the entire world form arises in that Vibhu, the one who is permeating and transcending. So drop the names and forms and go back to the light. That is verse number 10. Verse number 11. Palavam upadigal patriye Nama Kulam Ashramam Mudar Kolgai Jalatil Sui Madi Pol Suddha Anmavil Avai Karpitamam Hari. So slowly there is a gravitation towards the perspective of the jivas. That how did these names and forms get the jadi, kulam, ashramam and all that is because of the upadis. So the same light which was mentioned in the previous verse is now taken further. Like in the previous verse it was stopped with nama and rupa, but we see much more than nama and rupa. Let us say somebody says that they are not able to aggregate all the subdivisions as name and form, but they will say that the whole country's the elections change because of some reservations or this or that or namam kulam. I see that happening as a reality. How do you say that namam rupam? Then even those things, even those differences as this group, that group, everything happens because of that light associating with adjuncts is the 11th verse. Now, the entire Ishvara to world is going to be dropped, and the Acharya is going to help us see how the embodied Jiva is appearing to be trapped in the world but can go back to the self from 12, 13, 14 and 15. The 12th verse is about the gross body. The 13th verse is about the subtle body. The 14th verse is about Ajnana. And the 15th verse is about how the Panchakoshas appear to have trapped that which is not limited, that which is not trappable. So that is the layout in 12, 13, 14, 15. In the 12th verse, how does the gross body come into existence? The same one consciousness is divided into Panchabhutas, who in their pure form are of a different nature, and in their Panchikarana form are of different nature. Panchikarana is a system where the division of each of those 5 elements, the space, air, fire, water and earth, these 5 elements in their pure form are called Tanmatras. In one of the talks, Bhagavan clarifies, somebody asks, are the Tanmatras of the same subtlety as our dream experience? And Bhagavan clarifies, no. Tanmatras are subtler than the dream experience. Tanmatras are the adhara for what is there causing the dream experience. So the Tanmatras are the Panchabhutas in their pure form, unmixed form. Then they are divided into 2. Then one half is retained as it is, which represents that Panchabhuta, and the second half is divided into 4 subsegments, and then they are interchanged in such a way that there is one half of that element, let's say space, then the 4 parts of the fire, air, water and earth, together with the half of space, that forms the space that we see in the Stula. So how is the Stula body formed? Stula body formed is by the Panchikarana of the Tanmatras. The Tanmatras are the pure forms of the Panchabhutas. And that is how we get into the feeling that though we are the limitless light of the self, which could have easily seen the world as a mere dream experience, because we are not able to assimilate that, the Acharya is coming to our level. Though we are feeling as a minute, small being trapped within this physical body, he is going to show us that we are really not that trapped consciousness, that we really are out of ignorance. We are associated with those gross upadhis. We are that Atmaswarupa, but the journey back is what is going to be described in the subsequent verses. The 12th verse is about the formation of the gross body and gross experiences through the Panchikarana. The 13th verse is about the formation of the subtle body, the dream experiences, and I would go to the extent of saying the meditation, like we do a passage meditation, we do contemplation of what could be the meaning of some teachings. Now, those could be in the pure Panchabhuta states. We should understand that, so that the reverse journey, that the Panchikarana is actually contained in the Tanmatras. If we can reduce the sensory experience to the subtle, that will be a major reduction in the distance we have to travel apparently. When we remain at the gross level, everything appears huge. One star to another star, one galaxy to another galaxy appears to be billions of light years as distance and time. Whereas, if we can understand that these are all contained in the Tanmatras, that the gross is contained within the subtle, then those apparent huge gross distances and times, they all get shrunk into thought forms. But then that is how the subtle body is formed. Vayukkal ஐந்து மனம் புத்தி, வாயுக்கள் ஐந்து தி பஞ்ச பிராணாஸ், மனம் புத்தி ஈரைந்தான் ஏயும் கருவிகள் ஏய்ந்த நுண்காயம். நுண்காயம் means the subtle body. கலவாத நுண்பூத காரியங்கள். கலவாத, without the panchikarana, without the division, the pure form of the panchabhutas, but still the panchabhutas. That is how the names and forms in the subtle, we are able to, let's say, create and get trapped or create and enjoy. காயம் கலவாத நுண்பூத காரியமாம் போகத்துக்கு துலவாத சாதனமாம் போர். Those all experiences, all experiencing are said to happen in the manas only. Even that way we can come. That finally the jnani's prarabdha, in explaining, Bhagavan says in the talks, it can be explained by saying that he is having bhoktrutva karma, only experiencing and ending. So here, by shifting our meditation from the gross to the subtle, we are shifting from kartrutva to bhoktrutva, though with doership still, and that has to be erased to reach the jnani. But we get an idea that where is the journey to take place from the gross to the subtle, subtle to the causal, causal to in that way. If we have, then it becomes easy to understand that these gross distances are really not there, and they are subsumed by the deeper dimension of subtle body. Now the subtle body also is permeated by ignorance. Even I may say that I belong to India, I am an Indian. When I say that is a subtle body identity, that comes from a primal ignorance, says Bhagavan. That is the adi attrik trend arayavona ajnana, the without beginning and inexplicable, without being capable of being captured in explanation. Oduvar adi upadi, that is the first upadi. ஓதும் உபாதிகளாம் மூன்று உடல்களில் வேறாய் உபாதியில் ஆன்மாவை ஓர். So in this verse he brings to what is the Mula Upadi, the out of the three Upadis, the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body from the individual perspective. The Aneka Upadi from Ishvara's perspective. If you can see, these are all Aneka Upadis, we can directly go to the Atma Swarupa. But we feel strongly trapped inside the body, then we are trapped inside the three types of upadis: the gross body, subtle body, and the causal body. The causal body, you can't pin down the beginning, but the rishis and munis say that the causal body has a clear end. You can end it, but nobody can pin it down to say that this is where it begins. That is why the whole area of gross, subtle, and causal becomes inexplainable. That means you cannot convince somebody about liberation through the gross body, because the gross body itself is an illusion, is not present in reality. So even Advaitins are cautioned by Bhagavan that you should not have this intention to convince someone in the gross area that this is the ultimate truth. We can make a suggestive presentation whereby they can investigate and let go of the upadis. But one should understand there is no way to prove this by an argument in the gross area or in the subtle. So that is about the subtle body and the causal body. But the Atma is beyond these three upadis. These three upadis are from reference to the individual. And the whole 6 to 15 segment is finished by capturing how we are strongly trapped. the Guru leaves the Ishvara to self, which are covered in the first 3-4 verses. He clearly leaves with the trapping of the Jiva, so that the rest of the works, rest of the Atma bodha becomes meaningful. If somebody had had the subtlety of how the whole creation is within the Ishvara's aham, he wouldn't need the rest of the verses. But then the rest of the verses are addressed for a person like me, like in the journey, in the apparent journey, which is really not there. In this Janma, I had to go through a phase of reconnecting with going back to root ethics. Then when we come to Atma Vichara, we understand that whole journey is a turning inward. I could understand that the great ones have fixed all those relative sadhanas with one thread. Muruganar would say that is Tyaga. But from the perspective of Atma Bodha, I can clearly say that the purpose of each of those sadhanas, speak the truth, act ethically, have your love for God, all these are to turn one inward towards the self and for nothing else. That is the common thread. So the rest of the things I had associated with the journey, I will drop, and I will keep that the purpose of all spiritual sadhanas is only to turn inward to the self. And the 15th verse captures how the jiva feels now trapped in the koshas. கோஷங்கள் 5 முதற் கூட்டுருவால் ஆன்மாவும் மாசிலதே ஆயினும். Though the Atmaswarupa doesn't have any kalanka, any mass, how ayane ஏசரு நீலப்படாதி கலப்பால் நிர்மலமாம் ஸ்படிகம் போலவே ஒட்டா பொருள். So how the Atmaswarupa, which is nirmalam, which is still, which is nirupadi, how does it appear to be trapped in the 5 koshas? We should take it in the lightest way possible, not in the gross way. So the Guru gives us an analogy as how the spatika, which is very clear and transparent, if you keep a blue vastra behind it, how that spatika itself would appear to be blue. Like that, the transparent, the clear, the free, the limitless self appears to have trapped itself in the 5 koshas. That ends the 6 to 15 on the world experience. Bhagavan, of course, covers this position as Udalandri Undo Ulagam, that without a body, is there a world? So the connection between world and the Atmaswarupa, the intermediary stage is that you appear to have associated or identified with the body. That is why the world appears. So how does Atma Bodha make the journey to the self more direct? Is that it doesn't want us, or it doesn't compel us to inquire about the huge multiplicity that is the world. The connection between the Atma and the world is made that the Atma seems to have identified with this limitation of body, Pancha Koshas. All the 5 Koshas are called as body. The 5 Koshas are 3 bodies. They are the Upadis, and it appears to have trapped itself. That is why the multiplicity of world appears. Don't worry about what is happening in that area or this area in that multiplicity. You understand that those conflicts or those relative samadhanas, relative resolutions in the samsara are happening because of your identity. Like the spatika being near a blue color vastra, you, the limitless self, appear to have limited yourself to the body. Now from 16 to 29, we have been shown the discrimination between the Upadis and the Atma. So what is the discrimination? Unless you know that this is the Upadi and this is the Atma, how are you going to get Atma Bodha? Atma Bodha is what is being taken up as the purpose of this work. How can we get Atma bodha if that Atma, which apparently contaminated with the association with the upadhis, feels that the limitless has become the limited world of names and forms? What is required to make the journey towards the limitless? We should have viveka, we should have the vairagya and the abhyasa. The viveka is first required so that the vairagya can be applied to the upadhis, and the abhyasa can be to hold the Atma Swarupa. So let us see how the discrimination between the upadhis and the Atma Swarupa are mentioned here. I hope the first two segments have been summarized. The first segment is the introductory segment on the qualification of the disciple and the nature of jnana, and how karma is not a real answer to the removal of ajnana, and the two modes in which the realization is dawned. One is like that, like the megapaye amshavaniva, and the other is through sadhana, where like the dissolution of the alum in the water along with the impurities, the jnana sadhana also gets dissolved along with the ajnana. Then verses 6 to 15 we saw the world being described and how the world is really the Atma Swarupa. Initially, the Acharya takes us to the point where the Ishvara himself appears as the world. Then he slowly brings us to the possibility that we may not have the Ishvara's perspective. We may be feeling very trapped in this body of five koshas. So he takes up how the gross body is created through the panchikarana of the panchabhutas, subtle body through the direct application of the panchabhutas, and the anadi ajnana as the causal body, the Atma Swarupa as beyond all the three. We go into that segment which is going to give us viveka, how to differentiate or discriminate between upadhi and Atma. 16th verse, udal panchakosha umiyadi ottu உட்சுடர் பரி சுத்த ஆன்மாவை திடமான உத்தியினால் குத்தி ஒழித்தவற்றை அரிசி ஒத்தறிய வேண்டும் உணர். So just like in Appalapattu, here the Acharya is saying the whole process is like the removal of the husk from the grain of paddy and the getting of the rice from that. Similarly, the upadhis have to be santatam salipara santoshamagave. We have to pound in that sadhana of who am I, so that the consciousness frees itself from the false ignorant association with the upadhis. So the entire sadhana is delineated, though the details are not gone into that. The entire sadhana is going to be that the upadhis, you have to remove them like husk. That is the discrimination, that the upadhis or adjuncts have to be removed like husk, so that you can get the paddy of Atma Jnana. Engume endrum irupinu ஆன்மாவும் எங்குமே ஆன்மா இலகல் இல்லை, துங்கமாம் புத்தியிலேயே பொலியும் நிழல் சொச்சமாம் வஸ்துவில் தோன்றும் வகை. Now the first 2-3 verses immediately after the discrimination between the upadhi and Atma are given. Still again the Acharya is going to give importance to the Atma. If somebody can delink the Atma here itself, then such a one is encouraged. Where does the Atma shine? He starts off. He doesn't start off with the upadhis. If somebody can understand, if he has reached that kind of sadhana, though he needs the necessity to come down to this segment of discrimination, if he has some or if she has some knowledge, the he and she is not there in the Atma Swarupa, only as a matter of convenience or just for exchange I am using some gender. It's really not there. In that there is no he or she. But then the Acharya, how beautifully begins with the subtle, says that where does the experience happen? It happens in the Shuddha Buddhi, where the intellect is pure. He is not going into these are the upadhis. This is a whole new segment, and he is starting off with how the founding is done. Then immediately comes that where does the Atma shine? The Atma shines in the pure intellect, that is 17. Udal karuvi ullam odu buddhi mayai vidave udal karuvi ullam odu buddhi maya. This we can take as the three bodies in the expanded form. The udal and the ulagam. Karuvi ullam odu buddhi. The mind and intellect pole ari. When you drop those three, how does the Atma sit? The Atma sits like the king in a court, in his away, in his sabha, where the ministers, the other people, they are all furiously acting, thinking what the king will have in mind. The jester is there, somebody is coming for a judgment, all these are happening. But that Avai Karasan is sitting like a witness. So all the upadhis are functioning. Once again, the focus is on if somebody can experience how the Atma is a mere witness of those upadhis. He is Avai Karasan, he is the king of the entire court. They are all running around, and he is merely or she is merely witnessing the whole scenario. So the nature of Atman again is touched by the, though in the process of discrimination, the upadhis are all functioning, but who are you? You are the Avai Karasan, says the Acharya. That is verse 18. Karuvigalin Todil Kanda Aviveki. So now he gradually descends to, now suppose somebody is interested not in the Atma but is captured by the activities. Now we want some explanation about the activities. I am seeing all these activities. I am not seeing the Avai Karasan. First two verses, where does the Atma shine? The Atma shines in the intellect. How does the Atma relate to the Upadhis? It is like Avai Karasan. And all the Upadhis are functioning in that, the command of that king. Next verse. Karuvigalin Todil Kanda Aviveki. Karuthan Pol Tan Anmavai Kanban Duridamai Vodume Kang Kandu Unar Vili Sandirane Vodugiran Enbade Ottu. So when somebody is now carried away by the activity, so many great things seem to be happening. That party joined this party went away, all those things seem very significant. Then we say that I am moved by that. What is going to happen in my future? What is going to happen in that person's future? What is going to happen in this party's future? See, these aggregations, we should understand that the aggregations are also the Atma only. Like what we aggregate as the individuals past running over many years, that the husband and wife team or a small family or a linguistic group or a country divided into many parties. All these are only the Atma in different forms of aggregation and disaggregation. The whole country is the Atma Swarupa identified with all the upadhis that form the country. Therefore, we should easily be able to move like that, so that we are able to understand how the Acharya is taking us. That lightness of step, like Muhammad Ali says, that I fly like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Here we don't need to sting like a bee, but we have to be agile. The agility is that we are able to move with the Acharya, that all these are only the Atma Swarupa appearing as those aggregations. But here he has come down to those who feel that this Atma is moving, that the Atma is changing and experiencing so many things. Then he says it is like how the clouds, when they are running in a windy day, We feel as though the moon, the full moon or the moon in phases where it is visible, that moon seems to be running in the opposite direction. If the wind is blowing in this direction, we feel the eye, it says that the moon is running away in the opposite direction. And the Acharya is making us get a feel that all these, that the whole changes that are appearing in the apparent gross world, anything in the gross world, you should understand that perception comes because we have through Panchikarana identified with this gross body. Any subtle world, what is going to happen to India in the next few years? You want to imagine what is going to happen to stock market in the next few years, the next few minutes. That is because we have identified with the subtle body. And somebody who wants to get out of the argument by saying merely I don't know, but so also you also don't know, that is the causal ignorance, which is not really coming out of causal ignorance, but merely stating that and getting a layasthiti. But then to come out of it, we have to come to the Atma Swarupa. But all these actions of the Upadis, the great things that seem to be happening, the changes that are happening in the country, in the world, and which makes us feel that we are changing, the individuals are changing, that is like saying that the moon is running away, when really speaking the moon is where it is. It is only the Upadis, the clouds that are actually going at 150 kilometers per hour in the one direction. That is the suggestion. That, but see how gently he has moved to somebody who is interested in the action. In the first two verses, even in this Viveka segment, he is first taking that person who is able to identify where will I experience the self. That means his question is about the self. I am practicing. I am getting into the silence, but I am pushed out. I am not able to be steady there. Where am I going to experience this Purana? To such a one, first thing is answered that you will experience this Purana when the intellect is still. Bhagavan says in a quote, when the intellect remains learning its own Jada nature, when it remains still, then the Atma Swarupa rises and shines, he says in that quote. Like that, the first verse into this segment was about where the pure self can be experienced, and the second verse was also about the pure self remaining like an awake arasan. And the next verse onwards, next verse alone is going to go back again. Next verse alone, he say how we feel the Atma is actually changing because of the movement of the Upadis. It is like feeling that the moon is running away, when actually it is only the clouds, the Upadis, that are acting. 20th verse, ஞான ஒளியான் ஆன்மாவை நன்னி உடல் பொறிகள் மானதம் புத்தி இவை மன்னுதம காண தொழில் ஆற்றிடும் ஆதித்தன் அவிர் ஒளியால் மக்கள் தொழில் ஆற்றுவது போலும் அறி. Here an important reason is given as to how the Upadis are acting. In the previous verse, he is touching upon that person who is occupied with the movement of the Upadis and trying to tell us that really the Atma is not moving. Now he is giving an explanation. Then how are the components of the Avai, the palatial hall where all the activities, governmental activities are taking place? How are they coming into action? Beautiful Upamana, which Bhagavan has also used in the Who Am I, and which is so clarifying in nature, which is so relieving from the entrapment into the multiplicity of karmas. It's a beautiful Upamana. If one can grasp it, the coming towards the self becomes very easy. Jnana Valiyanmave Nanni Udal Purigal. Udal Purigal, the body, the senses. Manadam, mind, Buddhi, Ivai, Mannutama Kanatodi. How do they work? Atridum, Adityan Avir Oliyal, in the sun's rays. in the sun's energy, all the people and all the living and non-living beings, they undergo all their karmas merely in the presence of the sun. This presence of the sun is the presence of the Atma Shakti. In the mere presence of the Atma Shakti, all the upadhis are active. So where are we going? We are going through the presence of Atma Shakti into the Atma Shakti. Leaving the upadhis, how are the upadhis acting? This verse number 20, which is used by Bhagavan also, where Bhagavan uses it is Ellam Easan Sayal Andro. There is a question. Ellam Easan Sayal Andro, are all these not the work of the Ishvara? To that Bhagavan says, they are. But then the Ishvara himself is not going through any change or having any sankalpa. He is not saying that Nandakumar should do like this. He is merely existing and shining as I. So if you see some discussion between scientists, there is a particular tape video discussion between Carl Sagan, Stephen Hawking and Arthur C. Clarke, mediated by a journalist. On the video, it's about a 55-minute discussion about God, God's mind and the Big Bang and all that. There they say that God, if there is any, cannot be seen to be interfering with each and everything. He sets up the laws and the creation runs according to the laws. Here, what is the law that is set up? Even all the laws which you can decipher are happening merely in the presence of the Atma Shakti. See what a grace and what ease is given to the sadhaka, that you don't need to worry about how the gross objects are falling in place, how the human beings are controlled by moral, ethical or physical laws. They are all governed by the mere radiance of the Atma Shakti. Just like as in the sun's presence, the whole creation of the world, all the people here, all the objects here, the plants, they get energized, they go through their works, complete their works, go to sleep, again get up, and all that happen. Is the sun affected by it? No, it is merely radiating, and in its presence all this is happening. That is what allows us to let go of these thoughts about the gross world, about the subtle thoughts, in the understanding that we are going towards that Shakti in the presence of which all this multiplicity is happening. That is what is there in 20th verse. Let's go through 21st also. Deham purigal, tigal gunangal, vinegal, ஆகுமிவை தூய சச்சித்தான்மாவில் மோகத்தால் கற்பிப்பர் சுத்த ககனத்தில் நீல முதல் கற்பித்தல் போல கருத்து. Now, from here on, having explained how the upadhis are functioning, now he is going to come to the explaining of the gross, then the subtle, then the Acharya will move on towards the Atma Swarupa itself. For that, he will go into the ego, some verses on the ego, and then finish off this segment of discrimination. That means the next few verses, how the flow will be a little bit briefly about the body or the gross bhavanas, and then about the mind and the intellect, and then about the individuality, which is the movement towards the individuality being primal ignorance. From there, he will finish the area of discrimination between upadhis and the Atma Swarupa. Anyway, we will stop there and we will probably continue with the 21st verse again in our next summarizing session, if that's possible. Let's sit in the practice of Atma Ucharan for the next few minutes till 8 o'clock, and then we will wait for Akka's words on these verses. Shall we sit till 8 o'clock, Ujjwal ji?
Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifested as Ramana, we are once again going through, in a succinct manner, the verses of Anma bodham translated by Bhagavan in the spirit, very spirit in which Adi Shankara Bhagavad Pada has written them, because that is the first introduction which he gives. And as Nandakumar ji told us today, whenever we think or we are told of something which has taken us away from the truth, that in itself becomes the process to get back to the truth. Here we have learnt about the Panchikaranam. In Ramana Gita, Bhagavan gives a different process which is at the subtle level. He says that because of the light of the self, coming first to the Sahasrara, the mind center, and from there through subtle nadis throughout the body, one becomes conscious of the body and then of the world apart from oneself, and thereby becomes a samsari manujo bhavet, he says in Ramana Gita. So whatever is the process by which the division, apparent division seems to have happened, that can become the process, the reverse can become the process for us to get back to the self. So here also, from the gross, we were told we can get back to the subtle, then to the karana, and to the very source. And in Viveka also, Nandakumar ji has told us earlier, but he emphasized here, the point that if one is already ready to take the final plunge, then the compassionate teacher gives first that option. The first option of stilling the intellect. So in self-enquiry, the question, who am I, will take us beyond the intellect. Automatically the intellect is cut off, it is stilled, it is silenced. Who is the one who is to know? Who is the one who is to discriminate? So when that, in that manner, the intellect is transcended or bypassed or dropped, one may use any expression, but the significance to the is not given to the intellect, then everything disappears. When there is no good or bad, if there is darkness and light, then we say here there is darkness, there is light. But if light is there everywhere, then where to say there is darkness here or light there, or even to say there is light here? So it is the intellect which divides. And when the divisions are dropped, when it becomes still, then automatically the self takes over, or it's revealed, or the obstruction has disappeared. And then gradually we are taken, like, okay, for us, if we are not able to accept that a self alone is there, there seems to be something which is happening, then at the subtle level, we are told it is the sakshi, it is the witness. And then we are told, okay, it seems to be, it appears to move. If we say that there is activity, after all, there are activities happening, then the self is not moving, other things are moving. But if you go back, then instead of saying that things are moving, it is better for us to say, be a witness to the moving things. So once one is a witness to the moving things, then the question arises, Why should one remain as a witness to all these things? Why even the bhava of being a witness? What is the great deal in it? What's the great fun in it? Why? This is only, we need to have a Sakshi Bhava only if we want to give reality to the other. Only if we want to say there is a world, then we say we remain as a witness to the thoughts. Why this division at all? That question comes. Then one gets back to that stillness of the intellect. But if one sees the functioning of the world, then we are told the self does not move, the self does not have any motive, but everything moves only because of the self. Although it appears as if the self is moving because other things are moving, we superimpose the movement of this of thought onto the self. In actual fact, these thoughts also cannot move on their own. It's not as if the clouds are moving on their own power. It is that everything is happening only because of the power of the self. Even the apparent movement of the world is only because of the power of the self, which in itself is not involved in any of these activities. So Bhagavan says, in the example which he gives, when he gives the example of the sun, he says, why don't you simply remain like the sun? Why don't you become a light unto yourself? And if you do, then everything that has to happen through you will happen automatically. If we are concerned about things happening, and Nandakumar said to us again, he reminded us, there is no such separate things. They are all only the self, all aggregations of the self. So there need not be any real concern whether this is happening, this is not happening. To Humphreys, Bhagavan says, don't worry at all. There he goes through the Sakshi Bhava in one sense. Because to Humphreys, Bhagavan says, don't pay any attention to whatever is happening in the world. In fact, say, strange things are happening. Strange things are happening, even if things are very coherent, even if things are very apparently orderly. He says simply set it aside, saying strange things are happening, let them happen. It's a strange world, it's not a logical world, it's not a reasonable world, it's a strange world. So when strange things happen, one doesn't try to reason out, one doesn't try to focus on what needs to be done. Because when strange things happen, how can we say, I have to do this or not do this, or this has to happen, or it should have happened in this way? So Bhagavan tells Humphreys, don't pay any attention to the happenings. Then what do you pay attention to? Do you pay attention to the process of seeing? That is the Sakshi Bhava. See this, there are things happening and there is a perceiver. The perceiver apparently is aware of all these things as a witness. So Bhagavan says, don't pay attention to the act of seeing. That is, don't even be a sakshi, don't be a witness, don't pay attention to the act of seeing. If I am seeing only the act of seeing, I am remaining as a witness. I don't see the things, but I only remain as a witness, as a sakshi. But Bhagavan says, no, don't even pay attention to that, but let your attention remain only on that which sees. So you become the sun itself. You don't worry about the activities. Don't even worry about the fact that you are separate, you are untouched by the activities, but yet you are a witness to all this and there is only a seeing process is happening. Don't even focus on that, but just remain as the self. Get back to the source, says Bhagavan. And very sweetly, what Bhagavan tells Humphreys is that the process may not seem to be easy. This is why are we taken through this section of Viveka? Why are we told what are all the steps to Anma bodham? Because this appears to be, as we were told earlier, there appears to be a division. There seems to be some world. There is a world outside. It looks as if there is a world. It looks as if there are actions happening over there. So constantly we may take any one of these supports to self-enquiry, because any of these thoughts, any of these supports, any of these verses, each one of them can come to us as a support, but they are limited in their application. They are not total. They will not take us to the total abidance, because it's using the intellect that we do Viveka. The best use of the intellect is for Viveka, there is no doubt about it. If at all the intellect has some use, the use is to apply Viveka, to apply the fact, to make it understand its own limitation. That's the best use of the intellect. In fact, the only use of the intellect. Otherwise, what all it tells us is not true. So when it recognizes that all that it is blabbering is not true, then its purpose is served. When it discriminates not between any two external objects, but when it discriminates between itself and the self and pushes itself away, saying, I am of no use, then the silence of the self takes over. That's what Bhagavan tells us. But from time to time, we find some beautiful help coming to us in the form of Viveka also. It comes suddenly. This in the Anma bodham, through some words. When we interact with people in the world, we find that somebody says, oh, this was very helpful to me. Somebody else says, that was very helpful to me. In each of our journeys, different aspects of these Vivekas, these discriminations, we would have found it is of great efficacy to our own journey. And we need to remain grateful to that and understand that they could be of use to, we do not know to whom at what time. That's why they are all given. That's why each of these is given to us and shared with us, because it may be of use to ourselves or to somebody. But we can see the beauty of this discrimination, and seeing the beauty of the discrimination, then get back saying, okay, all this is wonderful, the discrimination is wonderful, but there is no need for applying even discrimination just to be the self. The whole purpose is to remain as a self. Whatever one may practice, one must remember it is only in order to abide as the self that we are practicing everything. Bhagavan says the beauty of self-enquiry lies in the fact that it consumes itself as a practice. All other practices are consumed by the grace of self-enquiry. They are allowed and they are consumed by the grace of self-enquiry. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana to all.
Namo Ramana.